So this is an intro to chapter 1, we could potentially call it, of our story. And we touch base on really going deeper into my story, just scratching the surface, the childhood traumas, how we identify to our childhood and how it, really impacts our adult life. I talk about, the situation that nearly led me to suicide, hitting rock bottom. What was the reason why? And that shows up in this podcast. And we delved deeper into the idea of the parental roles and, what it is to transcend pain and trauma. Anything else we touch on?
Yeah, it was just a beautiful, dynamic conversation that we touched on so many different facets of the human experience, from your personal experience to the collective, to, the pearls of wisdom that we took away from it, the perspective that helped you through this, your healing way, and your start of your self-discovery. And it's really, really interesting and really brave and courageous.
Thank you, baby. It's surreal to think that I've shared what I've shared in this podcast and not able to really say it's not been easy. It's been something that it would have taken me out of the game. I would have not been here, but now I'm talking about it. And I think that just shows, the strength and journey of being able to show up. And our emblem is about the truth, and that is the sword of truth, that cutting through all the illusions. And the more we step into that, the more empowered we're going to become, because we have big vision. We have big visions, and we realize that the more we talk and do this, and through the first chapter of this book, we're not sure what we're going to call it yet, that we're realizing the big people we are, to be able to go through all the deepest and darkest parts of ourselves that we've shamed and judged, and that we're now bringing to the open, because we really trust and believe that the universe has our back, and it will be received in a loving space. And anybody else who doesn't, and they're judging or blaming or whatever it is, unfortunately, it's, that's the old earth, that's the old paradigm. And the only way to, I think, to transform and step into the kingdom of heaven is to step into the new earth. And you can only get there through a place of love. There is no sides. There's just stepping into your heart and not looking to blame. So this is the nature of the book. This is what we're looking to do. And for anybody else who resonates with that, you're going to love the coming chapters of what this book makes, because it's really hard to believe. But believe. All right, my love.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, baby, for being here.
All right, listen up.
Love you lots. Yeah. Stay tuned.
Hey, baby.
Hi, babe.
So here we are, sitting down. It's been a little while that we can, the idea is now becoming real, to share something so real, which is the story of our life, my childhood and everything about it, and hearing about yours and how we came together. And so it's going to be interesting. I think our first podcast to kick off is us writing our book together.
It seems like everything has been bringing us up to this moment where we can finally share what we've been through. We've been kind of accumulating experiences along the way.
Yeah.
And now it's like time to actually share. And what we have is very special. What we have is very spectacular, actually. And because we know what it takes to get to where we get to, we also feel it's our responsibility to part that experience onto others, so that they can also feel brave enough and strong enough to pursue their dreams. We're not saying it's going to be easy, but it will be worth it.
100%. I'm not sure if that was interference from your phone. Okay. Something came through.
We're downloading.
We're downloading.
Portal's open.
Well, people might be like, what are they talking about? So I guess in the process, how we're going to write this book for the podcast is, when it's about my story, you'll kind of interview me and ask questions, and then that will invoke stories and, experiences. And we'll just do that, vice versa.
Yeah.
And kind of just see how we go. We haven't really done much planning or preparation. That's kind of our YouTube channels. Anytime we just sit down, we tap into, I guess, the conscious soup in that moment and really feel into it. And then we just start to channel and speak whatever comes up at that time. And I guess we'll do the same for ourselves, but it's so personal because it is our personal stories, as personal as it can be. And what we want to really see and create is an environment that whenever somebody shares their stories, the things that they used to judge themselves for, the shame, whatever it might be, that it comes into an open space of love from other people listening into it. Because it's not about judging and who's better and who's worse. Good people do bad things and bad people do good things. So,
what is good and bad
exactly,
anyway?
Exactly. So there is, and I see this polarity going on in the world right now. This duality is getting more and more extreme. And, people may be looking for role models because the leaders that they are being led by maybe are not being so transparent and honest themselves. And, it's human nature. So can they discern between them? Those who are being authentic and transparent to those who are not. It's very hard to be able to see it because people generally want to believe and trust people, especially those who have similar views to them. So we just want to kind of create this new space that allows for the middle to show up, where love shows up. So whatever story somebody comes with, not to judge or blame them, so that other people have permission to then share their story. And
give themselves the permission.
Yeah, it's giving themselves the permission to transcend their pains and traumas. You might hear a lot of that throughout this book and podcast, to then alleviate themselves to a higher consciousness. And this is only going from our own experiences. And, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was deeply unconscious when I was growing up. I'm sure I was observing a lot of the things that were happening, but I didn't have a role model or a mentor in my life at that time that was able to direct me through this anguish and spiritual journey. But then again, maybe I did all along, myself, directing myself for it, even if I was a child. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Where does one start? Because it's your whole life and you don't want to share the whole life, or maybe we do. We just see what's fascinating for some people, if they find it interesting or not.
Well, I believe that whatever flows, because first and foremost, this is like us taking a self-love pill. First of all, we're doing it for ourselves, and we're honoring ourselves and each other through these conversations. Because a lot of the time, during the times of confusion, we didn't know what to expect. All we did was just kind of following our heart and staying strong in our bond, so that nothing would compromise our experience of this life together. And, having to persevere through that and sometimes make choices that are extremely courageous and brave and maybe to some people extremely risky. We have opened up to the new lands, the new opportunities that may not have been walked before. So that's the whole idea of our union and of our coming together. It's the breakthrough. It's the paradigm shifts in such a way that is uncommon, that is new, that is, depicting of a new civilizational curve, the jump in consciousness. So this is why, when we met, we knew we were onto something really special. And that's what we're here to share. Yeah.
We had an idea of where we're going to start with this, but as you're saying, when we met, maybe that's the story we talk about now. Just before meeting you, I remember a mutual friend was saying to me, love is not unconditional, love is conditional. What if somebody does this? What if somebody does that? What if cheats? What's this? Suddenly it's not unconditional, it'd be conditional. And I hear these things and I take it as potentially a truth based on somebody's profession. So, okay, if that's true or not. But I kind of wanted to live in a world where there is unconditional love. because I don't think I had it until when my mother died when I was 9 years old. Unconditional love was there at the beginning, most likely, but I just had a few moments of memories of it, and then it was gone. So I didn't really feel the unconditional love ever since my mum's passing, you know. So was it true? Was it not? Well, I hadn't experienced it. I don't remember experiencing it because it was such a long time ago. And then when we met, you know, I understood that there is unconditional love because I know I can love unconditionally. And you showed me that side of myself because I was ultimately seeing myself in you as you were seeing yourself in me. And we really tested each other on what love could be seen as conditional. And if, like my previous relationships beforehand, it would have been very conditional, you know, based on this,
the horse
and this.
trade.
Yeah, the horse trading, very low level. And, you know, the more you go through this journey about learning through relationships, you see that what it is you don't want, you start to learn more of what it is you do want. And, you know, it's nice to find that place now. There's that when we met each other, we suddenly realized, there is no ceiling. That we can just go higher and higher and higher and higher. And no one's going to hold each other back. So it allowed us to really connect and create something beautiful. So, yeah, why don't you share the story of when we met? I think we already shared it just yesterday, right?
Yeah, well, before I go into that beautiful story, I just wanted to kind of intersect here with regards to unconditional love.
Yeah.
Because interestingly enough, just before me and you met, I did such deep personal and spiritual work where I have been declaring that I am unconditional love. So it was a very conscious intent of having to live out that truth in my experience. And, you know, this is a kind of a confirmation of how strong our thoughts are and how much we can manifest and so quickly and easily. And interestingly enough, in order to find out what unconditional love is, first, I had to see all the possible conditions that I have set for myself between myself and pure love. So between myself and myself, what was in the way of, pure unconditional love towards myself. And it's been showing up to me through people, circumstances, some of the closest people, experiences that are completely extraordinary that most people on earth haven't gone through, but I've been blessed to have gone through them myself. And so once I have kind of peeled off the layers of the onion of all the parts of myself that I did not love, or the parts of myself that I only loved conditionally. If I was to be a certain way, then I was good enough, to worthy of love. And so that created a whole mesh of different experiences, And when I met you, it was very evident to me that we already stood on a totally different ground in regards to relationships, because we made a conscious decision not to bring any of our past experiences into our relationship. Yes, they've they've echoed through our relationship, and it's something that we're working on every single day, like pulling out the weeds of PTSD, of the old debris, of broken hearts, really. And, we have to just be compassionate with ourselves and each other. And that's how you grow in unconditional love. So it's a very transformative state to be when you know you are love, that you don't do love, you don't love. So I love and then I don't love. That's the conditions. When you are in a state of love, you are love. And there's just that. And that's where I think with people with open hearts, it can be a little bit challenging, because when you are pure love, you can completely disregard red flags, because you don't want to believe the world is that way, right?
Yeah, I think, it's very rare to find somebody who's constantly in pure love, of course, because, a lot of the time we are overloaded, our senses, especially in societies now, to stay there constantly. There's so many trigger points that for any person out there who is, a sage or a guru in some regard, we talk about enlightenment, and we see this, and it's always this. I remember me starting a journey of, what is it to be enlightened? I want to experience that, I want to transcend consciousness to reach that point. But if you've never experienced something like love, because it was maybe taken away from you as a child, then you don't have any reference point. For a lot of people who have started their childhood know what that is, because they were in a protected environment and they felt that love and they've had that experience. And then for those who've never had it, how do they know that they're going to ever reach it? Or if they did, would they know the difference? So the more you've taught me we taught each other, through these experiences of what this love is, and that we've able to have, that's the focus really. If I'm not in my heart, you make me aware of it. And when I am in my heart, things flow a lot better. And so it's just really the practice every day is, am I in my heart, or when am I triggered that takes me out of my heart? And then I'm not able to, and then I'm in the stress and then the fear, and then everything else takes over. And then I have to control everything around me because I'm fearful. And I've noticed that, in my father, when or anybody I observe who's in a fear state, they want to control their surroundings because it's sort of, they resent everybody around them, or they're sort of angry to all the people around them for kind of causing that. It's sort of the fear talks, and it sort of surrounds. But then when you go back into your heart, once the fear's over, you've already done the damage, and then you're sort of back to yourself again. Then there's the guilt, and there's the anger in it, and becomes this crazy eight that Tony Robbins talks about. So, I've noticed that, within myself, that these are the patterns I picked up when I was a child, to see the dominant figure, how they operated. Because when I didn't have a mother growing up, I had two brothers and a sister. So we were sort of bringing ourselves up. And, you really made me aware of it last year when I saw my sister in Spain, that, it looked like we grew up as orphans. Father wasn't present, mother wasn't there, of course, and we were bringing ourselves up. And there was just this need for love and attention. We just never seemed to have experienced it growing up. And I know you had a similar type experience, from your parents. So did you ever experience, did you know what love was? But you had your lighthouse, which was your grandma. And I was thinking to myself, did I have a lighthouse? I think my dog Sadie was our lighthouse. That was about as close as it was when we were growing up.
Well, the beauty of life is that we come from love. When we are born into this world, we already come from love. It's like that analogy I gave you before, that, the planets are being born out of the sun. So the sun births a little planet that has the essence of the sun within it. Even though it's got a different shell and crust around it, it still has the essence of the sun. So it's the principles of the universe are all the same. So we all come from love. We all come from pure unconditional love. And it is the reality of a duality that gets us hurt to a degree. The heartbreak starts from the beginning. We come in as perfect, whole, and complete crystals, and then we start slowly being chipped away as we go through life, because we make it mean something. That's when the mind steps in and starts to create a certain meaning out of that experience. So I've always felt somehow blessed, always. That's just a feeling that I've always felt with me. Even when I was in a moment of really deep anguish of a personal battle within myself, with my parents, with my caretakers, just because they were not in a position. They just were not in a position to be able to parent at the time. They were children themselves, and you understand that later. Obviously, when you're young, you kind of start to think, is the whole life, is the whole world like that? Are all the other people like that? And so, it's it's when the mind steps in and the mind starts to make stories about yourself and about your life that you start to believe that you are not experiencing love, but you are love. And it just takes a matter of going into the heart to align to that source, to know that it's just the mind telling stories. That makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. You know, because if you don't have a role model who doesn't know how to go to their heart and they're always from their mind, then you only connect to them through the mind.
Yeah.
And I was always led to believe that the mind and intellectual intelligence was the most important. And only until I realized later on, after, you know, a destructive life, that there was EQ, you know, emotional intelligence. And what does that mean? Like, because I thought when I was growing up, I was not smart because I was picked on based on my, the fact I was different. You know, growing up, I had straight away remembering I had ear issues. So I'd have grommets and things like this. I'd be in and out of hospital for different operations. And it would affect my speech a little bit if I was mumbling or something like this. And so I went to a school called London Mead in Haywards Heath or Burgess Hill, Haywards Heath, let's say, somewhere around there, West Sussex. And, you know, this is not, you know, from my stories and whatever I'm communicating, there is no blame or judgment. I believe that really everybody who took part in all of our lives, as our friend says, they're agents of the universe who come down to direct us into the people we're becoming now, as soon as we take full responsibility for ourselves and not blame them or become victims in some way. So I'm going back to the childhood, and you know, my older brother was showing up in the way he needed to, so I could obviously have some depth and understanding about myself through his name calling and bullying when I was growing up, through my speech impediments, or I had a pot belly as a kid growing up. And when more somebody's, you know, putting pressure on you and you're not able to withstand it, because I felt like I was a light. I felt I was, you know, like joyful to some regard. But those who are hurting want to block out the light, you know. They project onto you their own insecurities. As I know you know, you've had that experience. So it's sort of like the moon and the sun coming together, the eclipse. And those who are that eclipse project onto you their pain, and they can never see the light and the love from the other person because they're not able to receive it, or it hurts them when they see somebody from a loving space, or they're happy because it reminds you of what you're not. So from that experience, I remember saying things like, I know you are, but what am I? And I always got teased for saying that, but I felt it, I suddenly realized when I got beyond the insecurities and the fear of judgment from, you know, my family, that I'd, you know, created from my childhood experiences. I found it quite profound saying something like that, because I wasn't one to really want to call names to somebody. So I know you are, but what am I is the truth. Whatever someone's projecting out to you something themselves, they are calling themselves that. And I just didn't want to take it on as my own. But it, like anything, over and over and over a day, you know, it erodes like water on rocks. It takes time. It does erode and erode and erode. So I know I had a strong temperament when I was younger, but over and over again, when there's no parents around and you're taking that kind of abuse on a day-to-day basis, as well as earaches I was getting, it was absolute agony. And I know a lot of people, you know, childhood have their kind of different ailments. And I wondered myself later on, you know, my earaches, you know, the grommets and the issues, was it because of just one of those things, or was it psychosomatic? You know, I didn't want to hear.
Why didn't you want to hear the name calling?
The main name calling, potential other things that were going on in my childhood that maybe I don't remember.
So what would be your earliest childhood memories? Like, what was your earliest childhood memories? How do you remember yourself? How do you remember your family?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is, I mean, look, remembering myself, I just remember being I think like a little chubby baby, kind of happy, bouncing around.
Must have been so cute.
Yeah, well, you've seen some of the pictures. And I was just, being myself as any baby is, looking to play and just wanting to be joy. But my mother was sick straight after my young brother was born. He's 14 months younger than me, and as soon as he was born, my mum developed cancer. I think it was breast cancer initially, and it started to ravish. It went into her bones, and then she had to have a bone replaced with metal rods, and it became this whole process towards her death. So throughout our whole childhood, our mother was already distracted, which is, of course, when death is looming, but you don't want to accept it, but it's already at the back of your mind. So in that regard, it feels like that was sort of passed on, the back of the mind, the illness. Even though there was nothing there for me, it felt like I was searching for it. It was sort of given that energy. So what she, her fears or whatever else, which were very well warranted, she'd, passed on, because that's just the way it was, right? That's how way she deals with things. So I guess I took it on subconsciously. I certainly didn't do it consciously. And when you're a child and somebody's distracted all the time, you kick off, and then you feel selfish for the fact that you're needing attention when somebody's not well. But I didn't understand it at the time. And school and all that sort of stuff just didn't really matter growing up. It just didn't really matter at all, because in a situation like this, you don't really have there's no reason why to be at school when your life at home is challenging. But it's funny, because we had that, yet my father was successful in what he did, being a music producer. He produced the first music video on television. Video Killed the Radio Star, Boggles, or something. I should know all this stuff, right? Should. And then Bohemian Rhapsody, got Queen behind you there. All these songs in the 80s and in the 70s, 80s that he really pioneered. So, he's incredible in that regard, what he managed to create. But when you create business like this, especially about the internet and everything else, you need to be there a lot of the time. You have to, travel a lot. So he wasn't there growing up. And if he was, then he would be a lot of the time upset, mood swings, from drugs and booze. I'm saying this because he's written a book about it. He's drug and booze taking days. So it's not like I'm saying anything he doesn't know and doesn't want anyone to know about. He enjoys his stories, but it left a bit of destruction within the family dynamic, because we didn't have a father there who was present. And it's no blaming him, because he could only give as much presence that he'd been shown when he was younger. And I believe that he had trauma that he has yet to deal with properly, and this is why he sought refuge in booze and drugs throughout our childhood, because of his way of dealing with stress and pressures, especially the more he was taking on, and the more videos, the more rock stars, in that industry, and then mother dying. So everybody's always doing the best they can. And that I believe, because suddenly you become an adult and you start to see the fact that you might do similar patterns as they do. So you don't, we get taken over by something else. It's like another entity, as we talk about. So I believe, seeing my father go through what he, went through, something else took over him. His pain body, the trauma that has been given to him from potentially his parents or grandparents, et cetera, if they'd had unresolved issues. And because of that, he was also absent to a degree, So my mother was absent because she had an illness, and she was such an earth mother, from what I remember, just a mother, But then when she passed, which was, I remember it being in the hospital. Just before the hospital, we were told in the garden area, when I was about, I think, 8, that So me and my brother used to roll down this hill, and every time we rolled down this hill in our back garden, we always felt like anytime we had too much fun, then something bad would happen. And we'd always seem to roll, and then we would wait, and something bad would happen, and we'd be like, oh, it's confirmed. If we have too much fun, something bad will happen. And one day we were just having a really great time just playing in the back garden together. And remember, it was just a long day of it. And then my father pulled us aside with my sister and said, look, Mum's never coming out of hospital again, and she most likely will die. And I remember my sister crying, then I was crying, and my brother Thomas just looked really confused, as a 7-year-old would do at that time. And I realized that after speaking to someone just yesterday, our friend Imad, her sister, how when she was 12, somebody rung up and basically told her father died. And she detached from herself. So when I was coaching her yesterday, I was just channeling into what she was feeling. She still does that because she's linking back to the trauma that's still unresolved. So she is scared to take on any responsibility because she keeps detaching from her body, like the trauma of finding that out. So when you're not fully present in your body, you can eat a lot. You know what I mean? You wait until you feel in your body the pain in your stomach, because then it communicates to you saying, I'm here. Because a lot of these people have detached due to traumas, and they might not even remember the situation or when that time came, depending on how old they are. So when I was communicating to her, and I just suddenly realized with my brother that he must have had that experience, that he detached from his body. Because I just remember now that experience when we said it, he went away because the trauma, the shock of it was just too much. And that's what the ego does. It kind of separates from the body, because in that moment it becomes like a split crisis. It's a shock. It's real trauma that's coming in, and the body.
Defragmentation.
Yeah, defragmentation. And if you don't have somebody who's trained or who's nearby who can really help guide you back to your body, then you can't really experience life fully now in the present moment, because you're still somewhere else. You're still in
a part
shock.
of you is still serving that trauma.
Yeah, it's still serving that trauma. You're still locked in time, and trauma freezes time. It freezes you in time. So, and I see that sometimes, my brother Tom, that boy in that moment, and he's an awesome man, as you know, and anybody who meets him. And sometimes I see that little boy still, who's stuck in that moment, at that moment of time. And I think that's probably why I became a coach and do what I do, because I was trying to figure out for myself and everybody around me, I didn't want anybody to be stuck in time. I wanted to really transcend myself, because I didn't want to be stuck in time and repeating the same patterns over and over, because doing the same thing over and over and expecting
different
result is insanity. So I just watching everybody being insane. And I just didn't want to be in the insane asylum anymore. I'm not saying my family are insane, but just anybody who's stuck in a pattern and is not willing to see it. So I had to do the work on myself. So going back to that situation when we suddenly saw each other, and my dad telling us what had happened, and that detachment with my brother and this person I noticed yesterday, I'm just suddenly seeing the direct correlation between the two. There's that innocence that suddenly is taken in that moment of trauma. That joy and innocence are so interlinked. And I believe that there's the trauma of news, and there's also shame. And shame is such a low vibration that a lot of situations that are going on around the world, and there's a lot of things that are coming up, basically whatever adult is already carrying shame from their own childhood, they are seeking to connect to the joy again through the child. But that means they impart shame onto that child. And then that child is then not able to connect to joy and their innocence, because the shame's been given to them. It's like an eclipse. But the belief is that you think it's taken from you, but it's not taken. It's just the joy has been covered by the shame, the darkness, that you don't know if you'll ever be able to reach there again.
But what is the shame? What is the shame linked to? I mean, you're saying sadness and shame. In the moment when you're finding out about the death of someone, what is the shame linked to?
Well, the shame, for this particular, I wouldn't say it's shame. in this scenario with my mother who passed. I'm linking it to that people have different situations in their childhood. There's the trauma of loss. I don't know if there would be shame connected to that particular moment, but shame is usually given from the adult giving it to the child in regards to an act, when they talk about pedophilia and things like this, or abuse, something where an adult is taking advantage of a child in some way.
So basically, an abuser taking advantage of innocence.
Yeah. So it's them abusing their power because they have disconnected from their innocence because of a trauma that happened to them as a child. So it's, having the compassion for those who act in that way are certainly not looking to do it because they're consciously aware of it, or maybe they are, but the trigger in the body is so strong that their need for connection back to their own inner child, that they look for something else outside of themselves. And then it becomes this ancestral pattern. It goes on every single generation. And I think it's probably more commonplace than we actually realized. I just don't think, because, if when I was a child and something had happened to me, say between 2 or 4 years old, I wouldn't remember it because my ego, like trauma, even when you're 11 or 12, your ego takes you out of your body. But when you're 2 to 4 and if something does happen,
To protect you,
because in that moment your body's in shock, so your ego goes away. Now, the mind can forget, but the body always keeps the score, which is an awesome book, by the way. And when the body remembers and your mind doesn't, and then your body's giving you signs throughout your whole life, and you're wondering, why is your body doing it to you? Why me? But your body's actually expressing to you a story. So for me, I had mouth ulcers growing up, here and there, because I didn't know. I just thought it was maybe didn't have nutrition and all these things. But if my other family does, and they don't suffer from it, then, why am I? But you don't know in that time, especially when you're not really aware of yourself and you don't have the vocabulary and understanding of how all of this works, the, psychosomatic, issues, and, the fact that the body is an organism that can communicate. It's just understanding of how to listen and translate what the body's saying. And that took many, many years until really recently, right? That we had that experience together in Ibiza. And, I noticed that the body has been talking to me for the mouth ulcers and things like this is, what is it I'm trying to say that I couldn't say? So if anything did happen, so somebody might, something has happened as a child. Because remember though, everything's always magnified as a baby or a small child, because your life is dependent on the caregivers. So whatever happens is going to be extreme. So, what happened to you as a child, and if it happened to you as an adult, you might brush it off as an adult, but as a child, it was a big deal. Somebody takes away your toy or somebody does this, suddenly your life is under threat. So somebody, abuses you in some way, but maybe it's just aggressive bathing or something like this. That might be a traumatic event. So you may detach from yourself because you feel, you're completely vulnerable. And so you have no say, or, you're just open and vulnerable. And somebody who's not maybe so healthy mentally or is carrying trauma may be triggered by that thing that they see so helpless, that they see within themselves. And then they may connect to that helplessness and take advantage of it in some way. And some don't. I'm just, in the 8 billion people we have on this planet, there's going to be a lot of that going on, I'm sure. So for anybody who's listening to this, they might have their body talking to them in some way, and they may not sure where it all came from. And so I'm saying that, innocence when we're children may have been taken away from us from some act that we deem shameful. And we've taken it on, we made a meaning, and we don't even remember it.
So we gave away our innocence, basically.
We gave away our innocence because of an act that may have happened, and it may not even be true.
Yeah.
But it was true in that moment as a baby's understanding. And then we disconnected in some way. We made it mean something, that we're not safe. And if we're not safe, then we can't be open. And if we can't be vulnerable, then we start to close off already before we've even been given a chance. Because they say 0 to 7 years of age is the time to create a mold that child. And then they go off for the rest of their life because they live those experiences as they're basically creating their filter, how they experience life. And the relationship we have with our parents is what we have with the world. And the relationship we had with our childhood is what we have with life.
So what does one do? How do you heal that?
From my own experience, to get to the point where I can now speak to somebody like I did yesterday at a little function, I can sit with them and able to kind of like a lock, doing the find and then open it up, like understanding that something happened and how do we dissolve this and move it and get behind it. It depends on the modality you're using, because there's like hundreds of different modalities, right? And for me, my experience, I couldn't say it was one thing, but I know I wanted to be able to be the one person that could sit with somebody and help them deal with something in a moment.
So when you made it bigger than yourself, when you didn't make it about yourself anymore, when it wasn't about being a victim or being the aggressor, when it wasn't about the trauma itself, when you have made it about giving and contributing to the world and making that your mission, that seems to have been the moment. Am I right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that moment happened. I've said this story a few times on stage around the world when I was representing Tony Robbins for Success Resources, which was a real privilege, I have to say. And we'll go into that whole story later. But there was that moment I was sitting in the back of the bus, red double-decker in Aylesfield, and I was really beating myself up. I was like, I could be fighting Mike Tyson in my head, and I was calling myself worthless. I was not enough. I was just, nothing, all because I was shaming myself and judging myself for who I was, because there was never a good enough reason for it. But I felt there was enough reason. That's why I didn't deserve to be here and be on earth, and waiting for the ground to swallow me up, because of other things. Because you know what it is? Because I didn't trust myself. At the time, I would be triggered, or I'd be drinking and escaping, and then when I didn't want to do that anymore and I wanted to be something, I didn't have credit, because I hadn't done anything of real value for other people. That's what I thought. So if there's no investment, you don't get your own, if you don't put something in, you're not going to get your investment later. So, if you don't plant the seeds, you can't reap the harvest later. So I guess I hadn't felt I planted any seeds of real value. So there's no harvest to enjoy the reaps of life. So I was, a victim in that place. I didn't blame anybody else. I just blamed myself. It was just myself and myself until that moment on that double-decker bus with my hoodie over my head. And the fact I was beating myself up, and I said, the reason I'm here is because I'm not adding any value to anybody's life. I need to be valuable. I need to add value to people. And really, it helped to stop the suffering, which suffering is self, right? It's, as Tony Robbins says, it's three different things: loss, less, and never. That's the illusion of suffering. So I'd lost something I didn't think I could ever have again. And I felt less because of it. And again...
What did you lose?
The idea of my attachment to body, the idea of who I was. I think I was going through a very tough relationship at that time with an ex that really, obviously, the twin flame, that we were kind of going through simultaneously at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it was just before I went to UPW, where we met without meeting in 2016. And, I felt I was nothing because the challenges I went through with my ex at the time had led me into this place where I was opening myself up. must have hurt her, and then she hurt me, and then we were hurting each other back and forth until we caused each other we were just operating from my trauma, and I just felt absolute nothingness, and then it was a tough one. And then obviously, I think the toughest thing to even say, it was I knew I was seeking to get to this point. It was something about my attachment to my body and the illness from my mother culminated this virus within myself. And my ex really brought it about within myself. We talk about the herpes complex, this idea of the virus, and, freaked me out, things like this. I remember growing up being freaked out by CJD and all these different illnesses that were there, because I felt like whatever I think about comes about. And that's what feared me the most. I couldn't get rid of those thoughts that would keep me up at night. So I kind of created this virus with my ex, because it was a virus in regards to the thoughts. It was a virus in regards to the trauma that we collected. The body was trying to protect myself. My body was trying to protect me by showing me a sign to say, you have a virus. The virus is manifested because of yourself. But at the time, I didn't have that intellect. I just thought, I'm attached to my body. Now I can never have connection with someone again, to ever be with someone. I'm disgusting, I'm this and that. So that's why it really led me to nearly, suicide. And it feels like there's such stigma attached to something like this. And when you go to a clinic and they tell you it's incurable and things like this, you're like, not my reality, not my reality at all. Thank you very much. And then it started going to the resources, reading and watching the videos and doing anything I possibly could to transform or transcend that fear of what is known to what is unknown. And I think that's when it started my journey as a healer, but I was doing it all by myself. I've always been feel like one of those guys who has a stick on their shoulders with the sack of their clothes, and they're just sort of on the journey. And I was on that journey. I think that's when a real spiritual awakening happened, because my father's attachment to his body, growing up, it came, it was brought onto me. And so the idea of attachment to body means you want to look like this, you want to be with somebody who looks like that, sex, all the things, but it's empty. It's not love. It's an attachment. It becomes a disease in itself.
Conditions.
It's conditions. All conditional. And I just learned that everything was conditional. I see how my father and my brother, and even me sometimes, towards my sister, because we learnt it all. And she had a tough time, But then we all had a tough time with each other, because we were bringing ourselves up with each other. My older brother and my older sister were sort of like parents. And my brother was, an alpha male who was, always the strongest in any situation, people around him, wherever he was. So he was a real alpha male, And so if you didn't look or talk a certain way, you'd be bullied for it, I guess, being individual in some way. So anytime I felt if anything that was special about me would be ridiculed, Any challenges I would be having, I would be ridiculed for it. So it really put me in this fear place that if I had something, like a disease or something like that, I didn't want to share it because I'd be ridiculed for it. I'd be shamed for something. And
so you would be less than perfect.
I'd be less than perfect. Yeah. And that was the real fear of it. Suddenly I realized I wasn't. And it was like forever, this scary word. That nearly led me to check out,
Which is not part of your reality any longer.
It's not part of my reality.
That's the beauty of it. And that's what the moral of the story is that you've transmuted it. You've transformed it. And a lot of people can hear you and they recognize themselves in you, because that's the virus that the whole of the earth has been going under. That's that defragmentation of the self from the soul, to a degree of this judgment of of what a person's supposed to be like, or what they're supposed to do, supposed to behave like.
Yeah, well, we put that stress on ourselves, and I made it believe it was something a lot more in my head because I manifested it. My deepest fear manifested itself. And it's funny how a virus or an illness or a disease or a cancer shows up in the area that is our biggest insecurity. So my thing was, I was hiding a lot when I was a child because I was so fearful of telling the truth about something, because I'd be, destroyed in anger of my father. I was seeing from what, was happening to my older brother and my sister, I was having to learn to navigate, for survival purposes. And so whenever you navigate as your child, in your childhood, you use that as your go-to throughout your life, of course. It's kept you alive all those years.
So did you learn to lie, or did you learn to withhold the truth?
I think I learned to withhold the truth, but also lie at times when directly asked. So my that probably led me to become an actor, because it was so good. But then every time I did it, I felt inauthentic. So when I became an actor, and that's, in my late 20s to, start this path, I felt inauthentic. It just didn't, I felt like I was waiting to be found out, as Johnny Depp said, when you're an actor, you're acting. And I remember even my ex before me would say, "Oh, he's such an actor." And I had no idea what they meant by that. I was not even aware, and you've made me more and more aware when I'm acting or when I'm being my genuine higher self. And to be able to access the higher self and show up as who I truly am, I'm able to see that I don't need the actor Alex anymore, because I'm having to act to navigate through judgment or pain, or to show up differently, because I wasn't enough at that. I wasn't enough. So I had to put on what do they call it?
Like an armor.
Yeah, an armor. They call it the, not the ego, but what do they call it? Pop star would have a alter ego. You have everybody sort of who goes through such a situation like that has an alter ego to some degree. They are creating something that they can hide behind, because then if they're judging that, then it's not you. You see what I mean? But
it's like Marilyn Monroe did with herself.
So you have an alter ego as a shield that you live through, like an avatar now that people are now doing in the metaverse and things like that. Their alter ego is now a manifestation. It's actually a thing. So that's also another challenge. I was speaking yesterday going, wow, that's what's going on. Traumatized children who are becoming adults are not able to connect in their body, because they're still disassociated. They haven't been guided back to planet Earth. So they're now living through an avatar to experience life, because they don't know how to feel inside their body anymore. So they're like Mark Zuckerberg and people like this, I think, are traumatized people. They're not from here. And if you're not from here and you've left yourself, maybe you are picking up something else from another planet. I don't know. I mean, I'm not, who knows? But when you're not fully here, something else takes over and you're detached in some way.
An assassination to a degree, that entity takes over. But yeah, it's the way that you describe it, I think a lot of people would be able to relate to that, because we adopt a certain role that makes us feel the safest. And in the world of adversity, we all kind of unconsciously seeking that place where we are the safest. So when you change the dynamic of your perception and you realize that the least safest place is in your roles and in your alter ego, and the safest place is in your authentic self, then you change the paradigm completely. And I feel that's what you have done.
You've helped me so much in that regard, because you've been in a space of unconditional love, and your patience has been incredible. And in some dark times that I've had, even at the beginning of our relationship, with myself, the COVID, another virus. I mean, you never, when you've grown up and all you know is your survival and you and your friend, whoever you are up here is your go-to, and it's like the voice that's always there that you think is helping you in some way. And I remember growing up, my mum dead, nobody's around me. I'm picked on, I'm in pain. I might as well just swallow myself up at that time. And like, what is there? Life is just bleak and it's painful. And then we moved from Sussex to London when we were 9 already, when, this is all happening. Now moving to an urban jungle, and now dealing with Sheen School where the kids were a nightmare, probably not loved by their parents, and they are now not looked after, and now we're all basically like an orphanage. That's what it felt like, especially the year I was in and the class we were in was just, 5 years was I there? My God. Wow. A lot of people turned out to be criminals later. A lot of girls were pregnant in the class, already. It's not judgment or shame or blame. It's just showing that there was dysfunctional parenting and the children were all suffered, like I was too, suffering in some way. And the teachers didn't know what to do with any of us. They just sort of stood there like silently with their arms crossed. It's like we just ran the place. We'd bunk off and, chicken and chip shops and all that sort of stuff, just feral children.
Well, you were reenacting adults because that's what you felt, that's who you felt had most freedom and decisiveness and control of their lives. So you, at a very young age, had to mimic adults.
Well,
whichever way the adults have shown up, you have mimicked that.
Yes, absolutely. I was able to blag at such an early age. Out of survival, just watching how to get out of the prison, it felt like, at school, and doing whatever it was necessary at the time to just to find something enjoyable, and if it meant escaping from prison, it felt like, from school at that time. I felt like I was always an entrepreneur. I wanted to earn and make a living, but when it first started off, we had a friend who had growing weed and really good stuff. And I was 14 when I started getting into smoking and all that sort of stuff. And I started getting some weed and able to sell it around 14 years of age and, making a bit of money. But, I remember my older brother kind of stopped the friend to start giving me weed to sell. That was his thing. But then I would seek it elsewhere. And then I went to an estate in West Kent, which is not, back then, it was like known as the front line. It was not a nice place at all. People would get stabbed or something, shot. And I would go there with a friend of mine who, me and my friend would go, find somebody, go, can you get something? Here's some money. I don't know, we had like 100 quid, which is a lot of money back then. Sometimes I wonder how I managed to find money like this, and they would disappear and then would never come back, and there was just nothing we could do. Why we'd put ourselves in a situation to give somebody money. But because it wasn't coming from the source that we could trust, because my brother wanted to protect us, or I don't know, just saw it as whatever he has. I never actually asked him, looking out for us in some way, or didn't want us to make money off it, or I don't know what his agenda was behind it, was intentions. I'm sure it was always a loving act. But then I seeked it out in a place that were unsafe, that could have got me really hurt, And then I kind of just stopped after that time anyway, because you just, that's it, fizzled out. It's probably a good thing I didn't go down that road of entrepreneurialism as a drug dealer any much longer than that. But you're trying to find power, and what I wanted to do is create freedom for myself. If I can earn money, then I can support myself. But I didn't have the confidence because I grew up without any confidence at all. I think I grew up without any confidence, but I did manage to do drama classes and things like this. And I'd be in a play as a lead. I'd be often picked as a lead growing up, and wherever I would go, I guess they saw something in me, but I didn't see it in myself, and it wasn't cultivated. It wasn't watered like a plant, so it would die out very quickly. And I remember in one drama school, we had a play, and these agents came up to afterwards, and they gave the actors who they felt they could represent. And I get given a card, and I threw it away and going, oh, my dad's an agent. This is after he was a music producer, and then he became an agent for presenters and TV in the UK. He was like the first agent, I believe, led the way. So he innovated two industries. So in business, he was incredible. Whatever he wanted to get done, he saw an opportunity, he took it. And I think that's a lot I've learned from him. That we're building the new earth. Got my smoothie here from our cafe here, and the other companies we have behind us that we've come together, and we're innovating in this paradigm shift of turning trauma and all of these experiences into something absolutely beautiful, kingdom of heaven. Happy to share it and proclaim this, because really anybody comes into our sphere, we just want to treat with love and respect and transcend any of their pain into something beautiful. And then thankfully we have the capabilities to do that for people, because of our own experiences. So I really appreciate the experiences I've gone through, the traumas and the pains and everything else, because it's allowed me to reach every dynamic I possibly can do in this human experience. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I can touch all the variants of pain and the suffering of the human psyche. So I'm not just saying it, I've gone through it, from drugs, addiction to all sorts of things, gambling, drinking, running clubs when I was, 19, 20, 21, a company called Mischief, China Whites, all of these clubs, it's really allowed me to tap into the pain of people because of my own experience through it and going there, and to be able to be in the rock bottom places and to be able to come up to here. I mean, I was never a heroin addict or, on crack. I think that's one of the things my brother said, for sure, never touch that. So that was crystal clear. I was like, okay, well, never go that far down. Don't go that low, otherwise there may be no coming back. And I'm sure there wouldn't have been. So there's some things that, I guess I needed to experiment with to know, because unless you've done a lot of these things, how can you help anybody through anything unless you've helped yourself? So yeah, up to that point. I mean, there's a lot more, obviously, we can go into it. I mean, is there anything else you want to?
No, absolutely. No. Whatever you feel that is the right thing to talk about right now is the right thing to talk about. So it's coming up. For healing, it's you basically just, as difficult as it might be to revisit those old wounds. The intention is that this is the last time, and it's only there to serve people. You were a healer from a very young age, and even when you were distributing marijuana, you were still distributing medicine, because it's a highly vibrational, medicinal plant. And so you were already kind of aligning with the spirit of the wholeness of the healing of the earth that is, has brought you here, and it went through your hands. And even though maybe at that point in time you didn't know what was happening, your higher self did. Our higher self always knows where it takes us. And there was a saying that I've never met an enlightened person with an easy past, because it's like all those calls, what we deem as calls, because they are painful and dark, under time and pressure, they become diamonds, and they become pearls of wisdom that, you kind of create an energetic template of a resolve and a resolution. And I think in this part of the podcast, we'll get to the point of the resolution, that energetic template of how you have transformed and transmuted that. What was the practical steps that you have taken now that we know that there was a rock bottom, that you had endured, and a lot of people in life have gone through that. And even though they might see it as a reflection of their unworthiness, it's actually the best possible wake-up time and the wake-up moment, because when you are in the rock bottom, you have nothing to lose, so only to gain.
Well, that's, people define what is rock bottom. I'm looking at my own example of it. My own experience was my attachment to body. My attachment to body really meant that whatever came, something so serious as saying is forever, you know. My ego, my mind couldn't compute such a thing, you know, because then what does that mean about me? Because I was the guy before, you know, it was just, that was who I was, but it wasn't me as an identity to somebody who was, you know, connected to this idea that, you know, women I can pick up and all this sort of stuff. It was, but I knew that wasn't me. I was playing a role, and that was the thing. And so life.
You were a charmer.
I was a charmer, a charmer,
and a chancer.
like a snake charmer. Like my father's much a charmer, you know. And I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad the universe gave me this virus, because one, thankfully, it doesn't exist anymore in our reality. And people might go, but that's not true. And it's like, well, it's not existing in our reality. That's it. What can I tell you? That's the new earth for you. But you know, I was so connected to that identity because I thought that's what mattered growing up. You know, this charm, it was very much like, you know, King Arthur's journey. And my name was actually Arthur for many years until I changed to Alex, apparently, when I was 7 or 8 years old. But I relate to that story because it's, you know, kind of grew up as orphans and then leading up to something, knowing that there was something special within. But you don't know until a moment's happened that, you know, something's called from you to pull out the sword of the ground, whatever that sword is. And for us, in our emblem, it happens to be the truth. The emblem, if you see at the beginning and the end of the podcast, you'll see the sword has truth on it, and it's got the duality on both sides, the dark, the sun, the chess pieces of the king, the queen, honor and love. So I saw that when we manifested that when we first met, and I realized, was I there yet to where the emblem was? Is that me yet? Or could I ever do that? Could I ever confront the shame of talking about something like this to the world and not be bound by it? You know, and I realized that I'm not scared of judgment or anything like this anymore, because I have anybody matters around me who loves me from the heart wouldn't anyway, and those who would don't exist in my reality anyway. So I'm realizing that the people I have around me are the ones who support and love me as I do them. And they're the only people I'd want. And we have such an awesome community here in Alberari that we're starting to grow, starting to learn a lot more from. And it's funny, as I'm speaking this, there's a part of me knowing that this is, it's all leading up to this point, you know? The truth, the story, that for my journey to get to this point, to speak with you now in our, you know, New Earth Studios room is surreal, because I knew this moment would come. But myself at that time couldn't believe it, because I had to let go of that part of myself to come to this point right now. And I think if anybody wants to transcend through their pain or suffering in some way, it's like myself, I went through many different modalities to get the courage to just speak the truth. That's ultimately what it is. It's just to own yourself. So when you start to speak and it's truth, and you have nothing behind you that you'll feel shame or pain about in some way, then there's nobody can hook into you, because there's no hooks in you anymore. And that's how society gets people, because a lot of people are walking around with trauma and shame that society hooks onto, and they're afraid to have their truth show up. So they're not able to see the truth that's happening all around them. You know, politicians that are completely dishonest and lying, that they can't even see that it's happening evidently in front of them. They believe that they are saying something else. You know, I could say the administration of Biden right now, people may see that he's doing a good job. But until you confronted everything within yourself and you've released the hooks and whatever it is inside yourself, if you've released it, then you may be able to see the truth of there. And I'm not going to say my views on it. I'm just saying just people have their views on who this person is and what they represent. So that, you know, the president before them. And I speak about this because it's obviously a hot topic for people in the world right now. I'm not making a judgment on any of it. I'm just saying that the more work we do on ourselves, the more we're able to see the truth of what's actually happening. The illusion is lifted. And that was my thing. I really wanted to cut through the illusions. I didn't like to go round and round. I didn't want to stay within the trauma. And I use the words like didn't and don't. But if you ever want to manifest anything, just avoid saying don't, because the subconscious mind doesn't know, doesn't hear don't. So if you say, I don't want bills, I don't want, I don't want pain, what you're saying is, I want pain, I want bills, so just be very wary on how you affirm and what you speak about, because it does come about and the subconscious mind doesn't hear the word don't. Anyway, going back to, where were we? Going back to, I'm sure we'll minus this from the book.
No, that was no. Of course, this is all live interaction. I mean, don't and so you basically when you're saying I want something, that means that you don't have it. So you keep on affirming that you will keep on wanting it. So that's how strong our thoughts are. So I would imagine, like in the situations like that, you would seek a certain upliftment that would say, if you didn't find it before in your environment, like your family and your peers, then you would look elsewhere. And I would imagine, depending on your values, then you would kind of single out the person that represents as the manifestation of those values the most, right? So. Is this how you came across Anthony Robbins? Is that how did you come across Anthony Robbins?
I mean, going back to the back of the red double-decker bus and about the values and everything else, I realized that I need to be more valuable. So I started listening to YouTube videos and things like this. I remember listening to one guy called Carl Harvey, and he was talking, and he had something similar experience. He was from Essex. He was, struggling. And then he was there speaking on stage in Mind Valley. And that was in like 2015, beginning of 2016. So I was watching these people, and they looked like they were living their best life, and they were free and amazing. And I was like, how do I have that? How can I have that? And at the time, I was living with my sister in a bedroom that was about the size of the studio. I mean, from what you see in this video, it's pretty much my bed and a cupboard. I mean, that was it. And the reason I was in that situation is because I left my job in IT recruitment. People ask me what I used to do for a living. It was like, I'm selling flesh. I didn't see it as, it wasn't my sole job, What am I doing? I'm giving one person, I'm finding a job. I just couldn't see the positives in it because of my mindset at the time. And I was in a relationship then that was pretty toxic. And so all I'd known is toxicity, because my childhood was toxic. In that regard, that's all I felt, and so I attracted more of this. And to get to the Tony Robbins point, I was in this room. I was pursuing I didn't mind living there because I was pursuing my acting career, but I already made a meaning in my head that actors are poor, right? Actors are broke. That was the kind of thing. When you're an actor, you're starting out, you're broke. So I'd already took that belief on that that's what it would be. But I felt free because I didn't have to sell my time to anybody. I was being a creative. But then when I met my ex, and suddenly that wasn't enough, and it was more about money because of her ex-partners before were millionaires, and, from the culture she had grown up in Ukraine, it was more about, exchanging horse training, her services for money, ultimately. I didn't know that. I was sort of so unaware of that. But then I got caught up in this sort of, I'm not enough, I need to earn as an actor. So I started getting some acting roles, even corporate acting for Her Majesty's Prison Service. I was pretending, I wasn't acting, I was embodying a criminal, a sociopath. So wardens would come in, and instead of, what would it be like? We'd make it as real as we could. So these people would come in to train as wardens for prisons, and then they would come into the cell, and I'd have a script, and I'd have to direct them into the script without them knowing it to see how they would respond to situations, and somebody would be watching above to score their efforts. And I'd be the scariest criminal in this place that they would sort of say, have you been to cell 3 yet? Oh, good luck in that one. And because they had different scenarios. There'd be like a young, juvenile offender, or there'd be a woman. So there'd be different roles. So they'd have to go to 5 different actors. to really, for the people to test the wardens to see how they are in all situations, to see if they'd be right for the prisons. And through that experience, I mean, to channel someone like that when you're doing these stories throughout the whole day, you get to see different people's reactions to you. Basically, I get to scare people as an actor who was in prison. But anyway, I diverse a little bit. This was, it was a gig. I was suddenly on a contract that I was a professional actor. I was like, oh, wow, I've got there now. I'm a professional actor after a few years. I didn't make it to Hollywood or anything else like that, which I'm glad I didn't, because then I think I would have been entrapped in my trauma even deeper. I would have convinced everyone, you know what I mean, that that this was okay. And I think that's what Hollywood can do. And Russell Brand and other people like this who've, shared their experiences and got out of it because they were not happy people. They were traumatized, but it was glamorized to be traumatized, because then you're entrapped and you're making money off it, but you're not really handling the issues at hand. So if you're making money and people are loving you, but you're not well, then then you're in prison. The prison continues on from your childhood. So I'm glad I broke out of that through my ex, who really, I'm not saying all actors are in Hollywood in that regard. There's some obviously very healthy people who are loving their life and enjoying it, of course. But those who are traumatized like myself going into that direction, I think were for the wrong reasons. So when I lost confidence through my relationship with my ex, I started getting closer to rock bottom, and then suddenly the virus thing, and then I was like, who am I? What am I without my body and all this stuff? And then Carl, a friend of mine, mentioned Tony Robbins, that he went to a year before, thousands of people cheering. I was like, what is this thing? This sounds incredible. And then I told my ex about it at the time, and then suddenly she was getting a ticket for herself to go. And I was like, wait a minute, this is not right. I need to be there too. It felt like this left behind type thing. I had to get out of my excuses and stories, and I have to find a way. And so she went to a UPW preview, which is somebody does a little 3-hour thing about the experience of what it's like to be at UPW, but you're sitting there, you're learning a lot. I really enjoyed it. It was like, wow, there's this guy called, oh goodness, I've forgotten his name. Deepman. Wow. I'm sure if he's listening to this, he'd be like, how could you forget me? But I remember seeing it, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. When I was at the front, and I was the first one to go back and sign. I had a credit card. I was like, it was like 600 quid for a weekend. That was a lot of money for me at that time. And I was like 30, 31 or something. I don't know. I think I was also being very Jewish at that time, saving money, but not using that money on myself. I think that's the illusion of saving money. What are you saving for? But I used my credit card anyway, and I was like, I'm sure I'll figure out a way, when the next payment comes out, that I won't have to touch what I had here to pay this. Like, I was broke even if I had money. It was now I'm looking at it, the psychology of it, it's, you don't trust yourself, then you suddenly have to rely on your savings because you don't know if you'll ever be able to create again. It's like it just came, you hold it. It's like a pillar if it all goes wrong or something. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but just observing it now. But anyways, I signed up, and and I started reading about the giant, release the giant within, and that kind of,
that book.
yeah. Then I made the decision to obviously go, went back of the room, signed it all, and there was there was an amazing feeling of facing my fear to sign it, because I could suddenly let go, knowing that at that time, that moment, I'll deal with a lot of my stuff. And I finally got over my victim mindset. Whatever reasons I couldn't go, I just decided that I can. So already there was belief in myself, there was self-love in that moment that it empowered me, because I realized I wasn't going to go round and round in a circle. That's my thing. I couldn't trust myself because I sabotaged myself over and over again. I was like, I'm tired of sabotaging myself. Why would I keep putting myself in toxic situations, and I can't seem to stop myself? That's an addict, right? And as soon as I made that decision and the time was coming, I was already, because I made that decision, half of the job had already been done because I was already preparing for that future self, reading, working on myself. Then UPW came, and it was the trip with my ex, and you were there with your ex at the time, your husband at the time, and I was just obviously with my ex at the time, and we were both envisioning a future where we were free in that regard. And I remember this visualization of looking through your eyes at myself, and my hair was short at that time, but it was long in my vision. And I remember seeing it like a happy me. And I just, with the meditation, you're closing your eyes, and it was like a white shirt. Okay, it was literally our wedding day. I just realized because I'm wearing the white shirt, my hair was long. I mean, we even got the picture of it. I mean, it was literally, I was looking through your eyes on and we just got married this year, and it's 2022, and that was in 2016. So I visioned our wedding day.
Wow.
6 years before, because I had the long hair in my vision, wearing the white shirt, and it's like, and now I see the face and the picture of our wedding day. It was uncanny. Wow. That is incredible.
You're a manifester.
Wow.
You're a very, very powerful
And I didn't know
manifester.
I was a manifester then, a manifesting generator. As I'm sure you just go into that one, people go, what is that manifesting generator? Who am I? And I realized,
I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I? So knowing that I have that, now obviously it's a different story, but I'm connecting to, myself, my childhood and everything else. So I feel like when I'm speaking it, there is a bit of like insecurity because there's uncertainty. It's like a part of you that wants to come out. Is it going to be safe? And I notice as I'm talking, that my inner child is, is it safe to come out? Is it okay to share these things? It's like it's been hiding for so many years.
Wow.
So many years just by hiding. And I'm just glad that, I wanted to create a space, We've created a space to make it safe. And you've created that space for me, that it was okay. It's given me the confidence to be able to do this, just to speak as raw as I can possibly speak. Because a lot of things I shamed and judged myself for, just before we got married, I wanted to clean the Roseman name, and by telling you all my past that I shamed and judged myself for.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, full disclosure. Whew. When we were, flying high in Ibiza, that, in the love space, that, you can really bring about anything and transcend anything and everything in that space because it's just pure love. Whatever help you need to put yourself in that space, it really gave me an out of body experience in Ibiza, because when I shared everything with you, the fact that if I stolen in the past or whatever it was, I mean, never fraud or anything like this, but I'm talking about little things when I was growing up in my childhood, or just, misbehaving. When you're running clubs and doing drugs.
You had a company called Mischief.
I know, it's funny. We literally... there you go, babe. Yeah, we literally created a company called Mischief because we were mischievous, Me, mate Carl and Stephen, and there was a whole, group of us. And I remember meeting them, and I was working at the gym at the time, David Lloyd, where my sister was, when I was about 19, 20, just after I came back from Tanzania doing community service. Really enriching time. But funny enough, I didn't feel like, not superior to them. It was like you go there and I became like one of them, and to the point where I didn't feel like they had anything more or less than me, because I grew up with less than myself. So I was already in the environment of people who had less. They kind of see those Oxfam commercials growing up. I was suddenly there in that situation. And I could really relate to them. I mean, I had food and shelter, of course, but the family we were staying with obviously had these things, but they had each other. They had always company, and they seemed smiling and happy a lot of the time, something I didn't really get myself growing up. So they were richer than me, it felt like, in the family in Tanzania. People in the West, we are like the 1%, the money and everything we have, but are we rich? Depends how we look at it. My father, I could see now, he doesn't realize the richness as he has, as you say. He's got children, all grown up doing their things, grandchildren, but he doesn't see it that way. Money is the richness. If you don't have money to do the things for yourself, then you're not rich. But if you live not about yourself, but you are about others, then you suddenly realize there's so much everywhere. And the West, I think, has detached us from community, and we're more about ourselves. People want their careers, people want, women not wanting children, they want their careers. Nothing wrong with that.
They're reenacting their trauma, remember? When you are thinking about yourself, you are reenacting your trauma. So you're making your life about your trauma. So proving something for yourself, so proving something to your ego, so that you may live in the illusion that you are not that which you judge. And that's like a dog chasing its tail. It's such an illusion. It's like that hamster in the wheel. Once you step out of it and you realize it was a game that only you were playing against yourself.
That's why you can never win.
And you make it about service, a service to others, and doesn't just show up in, say, companies or whatever, CRM or whatever, like corporate responsibility. It shows up in every single day. How are you serving? How are you serving the person next to you? How are you serving your family? How are you serving, your community? As Mother Teresa said, and I think I repeat it often, if you want to make a difference in this world, go love your family. That's where you start. And otherwise, everything else is just trying to maintain an image that you think will bring you certain benefits. And you are then just lying to yourself and you're lying to others. And sooner or later, in the day and age that we live right now, the truth will surface. Are you ready to see yourself as you are? Are you ready to witness who you truly are? When you will be faced with all of your inner demons, are you ready to take that? So, it's like the moment X, the kind of like judgment day to a degree. You can no longer pretend because people see through the bullshit nowadays. It becomes more and more obvious. I mean, in the political structure, for example, when there is a bit of adversity, when the war comes in, it's very, very obvious where their interest lies. You see that they make it about themselves. You see that they make it about their image. They make it about their own profit. So people don't feel safe then. So as long as you make it about yourself, you're reenacting the trauma. And the new earth has been channeled through us in order to have that space where you no longer need to reenact the trauma. You are living in abundance and joy and peace and in harmony, our birthright that we came here with. And we've been put like this wool over our eyes to a degree to make it believe that we don't deserve that, or it's out of our reach or whatever. So we're here to remind ourselves, each other and everyone else, that it's just a choice away. And a lot of people might not choose that, and that's okay. But here we are holding the space and serving those who will choose their higher purpose, who will choose the authentic higher selves. And the authentic higher selves are always at service, always. They're always serving the highest good. They will not be serving their immediate egoistical needs, because they know everything is granted, everything is given. So the more I give, the more I get. And it's not even about giving and taking, it's about being pure love. And pure love gives. Pure love, it just naturally radiates. It's like the sun. When you look at the sun, it just constantly is giving. It's constantly radiating love. It just is. That is the epitome of pure love. And you know how people are talking about, the sun being damaging and the ultraviolet rays and blah, 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 all of that. It is just how that love is interacting with our bodies, how our body is ready to receive love in a way that is ecological, is safe, accepting, loving. We're not used to it. Like you said, every majority of the people on the earth are orphan children coming from some kind of trauma, some kind of defragmentation.
You just kind of make me think suddenly now, COVID was a clear indication of how malnourished the children of the planet were, because vitamin D, there was a lack they had, which created the virus to spread, which meant they weren't able to receive love because the sun is giving unconditionally. But if you are not at the vibration to connect with unconditional love, then that kind of love is damaging to you because you're not willing to accept it, you're not ready to receive it, so you don't have the vitamin D to counter the virus. So people can blame here and blame there, but this virus showed up, and it's a human consciousness that we all put together, this virus, to lock down, and a lot of people have awakened because they were so caught up in their habits before, they were unconscious, living out their daily life, going to their Starbucks, their sugary cappuccinos or frappuccinos, whatever it was, going to work for it, not really sure what they were going to work for, to go, sort of living out this life, and other people in different cultures were doing very similar things. It's very hard to imagine different cultures only from our own. But everybody had a wake-up moment where whatever habits they had formed stopped in that moment because they couldn't continue life the same as they did yesterday. It reminds me of the proverb where the man's on a horse and the horse is going really fast, and the other guy sees him going past him, and he's going, where are you going? And the guy on the horse says, I don't know, ask the horse. And the horse is our subconscious. The horse is driving us all. And when suddenly, the subconscious is then formed into habits, because that's what we're doing every single day. 95% of what we do is habit forming, as they say. So when you're suddenly confronted that you awaken because you're not able to do what you've been doing and hiding behind what it is you've been hiding behind, you have to confront yourself. And we talked about it before, it's like a big game of musical chairs. And when the music stopped, where were you? And what the decisions have you made to lead you to the place you're at? And a lot of people were by themselves, single. A lot of people we met who were like in prison for 3 months, who needed that time to reflect because the world was going so fast. And thankfully, I made a decision to move to North Cyprus in September, October of 2019. And and I literally moved myself from my pain I'd gone through, and could I ever connect with anyone again? Would they accept me for the fact I had this virus? Oh no, will I, whatever it was, I put myself in north of Cyprus, and I was literally a nowhere man living in nowhere land.
Oh, baby.
And it reminded me, I was like, oh my God, does anybody have any free will? Because I remember when my brother would tease me, he'd be singing a song, the Beatles song, that he's a real nowhere man living in a real nowhere land. And he'd make the fun of me like that was me. And I remember when we were just, when we met and we were talking, and I was like, I was living in North Korea, which is a nowhere land because it's not recognized because it's been occupied by Turkey. So
it's not recognized by Cyprus, but it's recognized by Turkey.
It's recognized by Turkey, but not recognized by Cyprus is what I mean. Yeah. And because of that, I was in nowhere land. And I enjoyed being nowhere because
no attachments.
I had, minimal cost of rent, and I had a beautiful home. Yeah. Next to a friend who's a breath worker, a mutual friend that we met through. So I really, really appreciate her for giving me the space to come to North Cyprus and Kyrenia, because I had the mountains just outside my door, and I could jog for 5 minutes and I'd be in the sea. But I always felt there was something missing in me because I wanted a connection, really, because I live like a monk in the mountains. And any time I would ever really go somewhere, not just to my cafe to get my acai bowl as and my laptop, that would be my go-to place. But when I was asked to speak on behalf of Tony, and I'd be for Success Resources in Europe, or doing a tour here, and really just being on stage and able to make people laugh, that was my thing. I'd love to see people laugh, and if I could help people in that moment as well to transition and understand and educate them, as I was doing for myself by sharing my stories of my authenticity. And that's what people always said, you're so authentic, because I was giving from my heart. But I wasn't able to give the deepest part of the shame of attachment to my body, the virus and everything else was I couldn't just say that out loud. It would just be It's like, well, no, I had to get something for myself. But the more I'm living this journey, more I just want to be transparent and share it all, because there's nothing to judge or shame, because that virus and everything else only come up because of the shame we put on ourselves. So if it's out there, that's the healing process, because there's no shame anymore. There's no shame to hook you, to bring you back to your past. So that's how you heal. It's just a combination of the negative emotions that we've brought onto ourselves based on our own thinking that builds itself up in ailments and disease, because energy just not able to flow. So it builds up and it's saying, oh, you need to put attention and love here, rather than condemning it. And you need treatments and you need this and you need that. For some people, yes, it is needed. Because the belief of yourself to be able to heal yourself, like the placebo and things like this, it shows you that it's evident we can do it. But how do we get there? We have to face our deepest and darkest fears, our attachment to self in some regard, the trauma, and to go through it and to be able to transcend it. Then you're healing, because all of this is just feedback mechanisms. Your body is so intelligent. It knew life before a disease and it knows life after a disease, before a virus and after a virus. Just like COVID was a virus. I got COVID. It nearly took me out of the game. But my body's...
But it didn't.
But it didn't. And it restructured itself, and it's not there anymore. So just like anything else, it's just fear. And we had a collective fear altogether. And it took some of us away. Some of us just couldn't handle the reality that was coming in when you suddenly stopped and left with yourself. And maybe the pain and grief just to some people were like, okay, I've stopped. I know where I am. Okay, I'm happy to transcend now. So I'm, we're looking at this completely differently now. The paradigm of illness and disease, what the media might want to call it, to control, or they don't even know because they're unconscious themselves, that we know in the new earth that really this place means we have full capabilities to heal anything. We have our body, the divine intelligence within ourselves can do miracles if we actually block out the noise of fear and we transcend any doubt at all and believe completely. And I see that by just experience now, from how I feel and what we've gone through, that there's something guiding us that's bigger than us. And if we let go and surrender to that, then that power, that energy can really, really make big things happen. I mean, they talk about the days of the Bible and parting water and walking on water and all these things. I mean, I'm not sure we're there yet, but it feels like we're able to manifest pretty much anything and everything so far. And I can't wait to share that in the following chapters of this podcast book we're writing together. And can't wait to sit with you and hear everything about you. And I know I've got a lot more to share.
Well, I think that definitely calls for another podcast on your story, because I think we just skimmed the surface of the complexity of the experiences you've been through. And also the takeaways, the key takeaways from those experiences that have led you to call yourself, who you are, knowing yourself so well. So it's a really beautiful ritual of unpacking your own personal accumulative data, let's put it this way, you know. And we call for everyone listening to gather their courage and relieve themselves of any self-doubt or any judgment that they feel they might endure, and share the stories, share the truths, because once you do that, you kind of opening up the space. You are, it's like these little pockets of air inside the water that just coming up to the surface, and they opening up and bringing with them new seeds of new opportunities, that we don't otherwise know because they're so subdued in the dark. So, is there anything else you would like to share, or would we?
We need to get the next chapter going on the next podcast, because the more confidence I get, the more I want to go deeper into the trauma of shame of it all, because I know it's not me. So I'm able to observe it rather than make it myself, which most people do. So we can't talk about it because it's it's me, I am that. But you're not that. And as the more we go through this podcast, for anybody who's ever felt shame, trauma, pain, loss, heartbreak, any of that, you're locked in some mental illness or disease, we're going to talk more about our own experiences so that you can transcend with us any of your fears and give yourself the permission to believe in something new, because that's the new earth. We are living, breathing examples of manifesting our dreams, literally, and to heal the unhealable, and to be able to put the new earth stamp down and say that is what it is. And that is what we're going with, not the proof and the evidence saying that otherwise. We're not interested in that. We're not interested in what the mind has to say. The heart is limitless in that regard. It's unconditional, which means it can heal anything and everything. So we want to give you, anybody listening right now, the belief, the confidence, and knowing that whatever it is you're going through right now, you'll be able to transcend that. For sure. And through our experiences, we're just going to share, and you can connect to that.
Well, that, as I said before, this is that energetic blueprint that, we have aligned to the energy of a resolve, of a certain completion of almost like a developmental level. And once you align to this resolve of completion of a developmental level, it gives a guidance to others to be able to align with that without having to go through everything that we had gone through, because that's energy for you. What it does is that it's infectious. It spreads. It amplifies if it's put in the fertile ground. And those with open minds who might be right now at the deep, how you call it, like low level.
Near rock bottom, under rock bottom.
Or they've gone through that and they want to just expand their own tools of self-healing or help towards others. It's our honor to serve. It's our honor. As difficult and as scary as it is, it's probably one of the scariest things you can do is to actually openly
talk about the deepest darkest stuff about it.
Yeah.
But we're here not because we're here just for ourselves. We are here for others, and we're not here to try to convince anybody of anything. We're just going to be the examples and lead the way of talking about the most uncomfortable things that we thought would be the most, that we could never imagine talking about. But we're openly going to talk about it here, because every time we do, we know it doesn't own us anymore. So it's not part of our reality. We talk it because we are dispelling the illusion that it used to hold over us.
Sexual transmutation. It's actually being intimate and being openly intimate in front of others. It's the mind sex.
Mind X, and where we met.
We met in Mind X, and we're making it Mind Sex.
And we're going to do so much of this talking that we connect the fact, all these synchronicities that will piece together through our journey together. That's what I really want people to see, that there's a miracle happening. And the fact we met at Mind X, and we call it Mind Sex because that's how we met, and all of these moments and the different people we've met in our lives at a certain times, it's like, you could say it's out of a movie, and we feel so blessed to be able to share this story. And I really would like for people to really see that and go, wow. Is it like, that's true? It's true.
Is it possible?
Yeah, is that possible?
Yes, it's possible. We haven't even started to skim the surface, because the real development started when we actually met. Yeah. This is just a prelude to the real Big Bang. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey, because it's like, we call it a Netflix series. You just wouldn't believe it, but you're hearing it first time here. Before it, I'm sure some of the stories maybe turn into movies, maybe a series, whatever it is, whatever way we can get it out there so that people go, wow, there is the old earth and there's a new earth. These things can happen. Miracles can happen. And we piece it all together. And hey, if we need to give you evidence, we'll give you evidence if you need it. But we really want to be a place that you see the new earth and what we're about as just the most authentic and real it can be. And we want to be an example because we have different companies and we're building many different companies, and we want you to see the face of them so that whenever you put your attention or energy into it, that you know it's in a safe and secure place, because we're being open and vulnerable and we're not hiding anything at all. And we want to be open and transparent and show our cards, that's it. Because we trust really, and the universe has our back, and it's been guiding us so far, so that we realize, there's nothing to hide, because and the more we do this, I'm sure people will resonate and connect to that.
Well, there's a reason why we've been called to do that, and we just have to trust the process. And it's something that gets activated every single time we sit down for the microphone together. It's like we're going to a different dimension, which channel, and it's not something we can even put our ownership on. It's something that happens through us.
I can't. I just. You know what? When we get to the final chapters of this, whatever it looks like, whatever chapter 1, 2, 3 looks like, I can imagine we're already transformed as the type of people who could release such a book by the end of it. You know what I mean? I'm really looking forward to the journey of our becoming, our self-actualization.
Well, it's already happened.
It's happened. But it's in the present moment.
You mean like it will be unveiling?
Yeah, as more we talk, because it's the first time we've experienced in this regard that we're talking in such depth of our story, that I'm looking forward to seeing who we become because of it. Because I'm surprised by our higher selves, how they keep showing up. The less we give, less Alex or Julia shows up. The combination of our childhood and who we truly are steps in. It's like, wow, they're big people. They're big people. And as soon as I keep seeing that and experiencing it, the more confidence I have to allow for my true self to show up, my spirit to show up. And not my insecurities to go, no, it's not safe. So when that's gone, it's evaporated, which it already is right now. And the more and more proof and evidence of that as we talk will show itself to be evident. So thank you, because, under observation, like the slit test they did in, what's that experiment called, when the particles change direction when they are observed. There's something about being observed that transcends the
way they appear,
the way they appear, the particles, right? We will find out. We will find out.
I remember
anyway,
which one you're talking
you know what
about.
I mean. So this is interesting experiment. So thank you, anybody and everybody who's been listening in when we put it out there. And would love to know what you think of this. Only beautiful, kind words, of course. We don't open the space to any judgment or any condemnation in any sorts, because if you do, you're only condemning and judging yourself for a part of yourself that you're still judging and condemning to some degree. So just be loving to yourself by giving just giving love. That's it. That's the only way we can really navigate through these very troubling times and, really transcend human consciousness, because it's going through the next level now.
For sure.
And I'm so blessed that we can be a part of that. And I know we're going to manifest that as we manifest everything else, and we'll share our story along the way.
Well, you know what? Thank you for showing up.
Thank
you for being vulnerable, for being open, for stepping into new territory. And every single time you've amazed me with your ability to just step into something new so easily and quickly, and that's what I think keeps this interaction so exciting, and it gives this dynamic element to that, because there's always new shores to open, and really, really honor you. I know it's not easy, but it's so worth it. So.
Thank you, baby. I love you so much.
I love you, baby.
And that's when I get emotional, and that's when we turn the cameras off now. I'm always happy to let anybody see me, whatever state I'm going to go through as we go through this journey of reading this book that we're just writing as we talk. I don't want to hide anything at all. I just, nothing to hide. I can't wait. So thank you. I love you.
I love you.
Well, we're going to tune out. Or we'll never tune out. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Stay tuned.